Welcome to Hail Varsity's very good volleyball bracket breakdown. Can't guarantee it'll be very good, but it will be a bracket breakdown. I'm Brandon Vogel, our managing editor, and I'm joined today by the person who actually knows the most stuff about volleyball, Jacob Padilla. Jacob, how are you?
I'm doing all right. I don't know how much I know, but I at least pretend like I know something. So
Well,
there's
yeah. So let's set the stage here. It's a bit of a strange year. The NCAA released its 48 team bracket down from the typical 64 due to pandemic restrictions. Really set on Sunday. Nebraska earned the number 5 overall seed. Wisconsin was 1, Kentucky 2, Minnesota 3, and Texas 4. Nebraska in its regional, even though all games will be in Omaha. Which we'll probably talk about that setup too. It's an interesting one, at least to me. Nebraska in this bracket got Baylor, Texas, and Penn State as the national seeds. So let's start there, Jacob. What did you think of this draw?
it, it's a pretty tough one, but Nebraska also was a 5 seed. So in this reduced field in particular, I mean that's kind of how it's going to work out. It seems like uh, you've got Wisconsin obviously at the top, and then you've got Kentucky and Minnesota as a 3 seed on the other side, and you kind of feel it, the Texas and Minnesota kind of situation there. I think you feel better about having Minnesota on your side. Just we've seen Nebraska play them already, and I feel like Nebraska is a better team. And Minnesota's had some COVID issues second half, and that's one of the things that like with Penn State, where they are, they're putting the field here, but they weren't able to play the last couple of weeks of the season. So where are they going to be health wise and availability wise? So, but just kind of looking at that, Nebraska's a 5 seed, so you're going to be on the same side as a 1 seed. So there's no way to get away from that. But yeah, facing potentially Texas in the Elite Eight and the Baylor as a 12 seed in the Sweet 16, and Texas probably in the Elite Eight, then Wisconsin in the Final Four, and then whoever comes out the other side. That's a pretty tough draw, and that'll be a tougher stretch than anything we've seen from this team so far this season because they only got to play against 2 ranked opponents.
Yeah, and so in their quarter of the bracket, just to get to the Final Four, they got the 2 best teams in the Big 12, the only 2 Big 12 teams in.
Yeah.
I believe Baylor, because the AVCA did fall rankings for those teams that played some matches in the fall, and it wasn't everybody. Obviously, not having the Big 10 and the Pac-12 in particular definitely influences those. But Baylor finished 3rd, so if Nebraska wins its first match, they'll likely face the Bears, and then Penn State and Texas. And we didn't get that Nebraska Penn State matchup, unfortunately, but Penn State's Penn State. Their record, not what you typically expect from the Nittany Lions, but still a plenty dangerous and tournament tested team with their history. And then Texas, I mean, it would be a series of great matches, but in terms of the draw itself, yeah, did Nebraska no favors. I mean, do you think, so I don't know, do you think Nebraska, how do you decide between Nebraska and Minnesota? Because I look at this, with the way the bracket sets up, you kind of got to keep Texas at 4, I think. But Nebraska, Minnesota, they split their season series. Could Nebraska have been a 3 seed in your mind? How do you determine between the Gophers and Huskers?
Yeah, I think again, what hurt Nebraska is what I mentioned, and just not having the, the strength of record, I guess is how you could put it. Obviously, the Big Ten uh, gets a lot of credit for how good it is, but Nebraska only played 2 ranked teams this year, and they split with both of them. So, and technically, Nebraska was 3rd in the Big Ten behind Minnesota, since Minnesota got to play one more match. Go figure. But yeah, it's just looking here. They took a set off Wisconsin. The other one got postponed. They did not get to play Ohio State. Obviously, they split with Nebraska, and they beat Penn State twice, and they beat Purdue twice. So I think that's what it came down to is they got to play their Purdue and Penn State matches, and Nebraska did not get either one of those teams. So just gave them, I guess Nebraska also had the Ohio State, but they split with them. Whereas Minnesota swept both Penn State, or not necessarily swept, but they won both matches against Purdue and Penn State. So Minnesota just had a little bit more strength of wins than Nebraska did. I think Nebraska's probably a better team, but only getting to play 16 matches, they didn't get a chance to prove that.
Yeah. It's not all roses for Minnesota either. We'll talk about that in a little bit. I think we'll see what you think. But before we go there, I wanted to talk a little bit about the reduced field, just the setup for this, and like we all understand like what went into the decision to reduce the field. Like they're gonna play what 16 matches on the first day, all in Omaha. Like it's gonna feel like a club tournament. That first day in particular, with multiple courts going on at the same time. But I guess just go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was just saying, especially location too. I mean that
Yep.
convention center holds a bunch of club tournaments
Yep.
throughout the spring. So these players, it'll probably feel somewhat familiar to some of these players, although that's not exactly what you expect for the NCAA tournament.
No, it's not, and that makes me a little bit sad that the players won't kind of get that full experience. But you're right. Like, what percentage of the players in this tournament probably played a club tournament in that exact setting? I guess. What did you think about the reduced field? Were there any snubs that particularly stuck out to you?
Yeah, it just obviously the John Cook talked about and Kelly Sheffield talked about the reduced field and um, their displeasure with the NCAA sticking with that. I never believed that they were going to reconsider because they planned all this out and they don't seem like an organization that would be interested in changing their plans late, even though it probably was possible. But yeah, you just feel for the teams that were almost in and that only missed because of the reduced field and the fact that there were only 18 at-large bids. And the last four in, based on what they showed in the TV, or the first four out, were Kansas State, so there would have been a third Big 12 team, and Marquette was the second team out, and it snapped a streak of 9 straight seasons of making the NCAA tournament and made the Big East a one bid league with Creighton winning the auto bid. So that's unfortunate for a team like that. That's something that I know it's been a really good program. Creighton and Marquette have ran the Big East and they pushed each other back and forth through the last few years, and it's a really quality program. And they, again, 9 straight years they've made the tournament, and now that streak is over because there were only 48 teams in the field. And then Arkansas and Tennessee were the other first four out. So we don't know who missed beyond that, but Marquette basically got knocked out because of one loss. They lost to a bad Butler team and to finish 10-4. And their other 3 losses were to Illinois State, who won the MVC bid, and Creighton twice, and they were all 5-set losses. So those 3 losses shouldn't have hurt them. But that one Butler, and in this pandemic season, one off day, you don't know what's going on leading up to it. That ultimately ended up costing them a bid. So you just feel for teams like that and anybody else in that kind of situation. Obviously, Stanford, just a nightmare of a season coming off the incredibly dominant run. Just feels strange not to have them in the picture whatsoever. And they barely got to play this year. And when they finally got out there, they struggled. And you kind of expected, you definitely expected a step back based on everything that they lost from last year's title team, but it's still Stanford. And so to see them fall out of the rankings, leaving Nebraska as the only team that's made every top 25, and then not even qualify for the tournament, just feels strange. So I'm glad they're able to have a tournament, but overall it's kind of weird.
Yeah, I kind of went back and forth on the 30 auto bids, like from a pure like creating the best tournament. Did it make sense to do that? But then I was like, you can't you can't take that away from those teams. It's not their fault, but it does set up these like bizarre Army's in at 6-2. They've played 8 matches. Meanwhile, Texas State, who I think Nebraska will probably play, has played 36 matches and beat Baylor. So, not a not necessarily a cakewalk in that first match if the Huskers get the Bobcats. Let's talk a little bit more about the rest of the field. There's some interesting stuff going on. I need to look something up quick in this book.
Yeah, you talk about
Dream Like a Champion, written by John Cook. Just happened to be co-authored by me. Available, our books are sold. You got a week to read it. I just found it. John Cook once told me that his kind of marker for success was he wants Nebraska to hit 300 and he wants to hold the opponents to 150. And I was like, well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense because that means all of your swings are twice as successful as an opponent's, and it's incredibly hard to hit. But there are 2 teams in this tournament that are currently at that mark. Do you know any guesses which 2?
Trying to remember. Is Kentucky was close, I think.
Kentucky is one.
Okay.
361, 144.
All right. I know Nebraska is not one of them.
Nebraska is at 272 and 157. So close.
Wisconsin?
Wisconsin is the other one. They're
so top 2 seeds. Go figure.
Yep. They're 342, which is 3rd nationally, and 128 opponent hitting percentage, which is
that's pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Nebraska's 2nd in the Big Ten in both, but quite a bit of ways behind.
Yep, there's a little bit of a gap there. One team that's close that I know you wanted to talk about, and we have a good reason to talk about. Louisville, 285, which is 13th, 132, which is 17th, coached by former Husker, of course, Danny Busby Kelly. What do you think about the Cardinals?
Yeah, it's an amazing the job that Danny's done down there and how quickly she's gotten Louisville to this place where they're just a perennial tournament team, and not only a tournament team, they didn't go win scrape in with an auto bid. They're the 11th seed, so really impressive the job she's done, and they've got a pretty decent draw if they can get on a run here. You've got Washington, Minnesota, and Utah as the other national seeds in their portion of the bracket. And I was talking with Matt G. Marinas last night, who covers Creighton volleyball and pays attention, and asked him who his Final Four were, and he went with Wisconsin, Nebraska, Louisville, and Kentucky. So John Cook's team, John Cook's former team, and 2 teams coached by John Cook assistants. So just kind of John Cook Invitational in the Final Four this year. But I mean, that's not unrealistic to think that Louisville could potentially get on a run here. And we saw they did well in the tournament last year and showed well for themselves. So definitely a team that I'll be following as the tournament plays out.
Yeah, I like that draw for them as well. Any potential roadblocks you see for the top 2 seeds? So Wisconsin has BYU is the 16th national seed, and then on the other side of that quad, they have Ohio State and Florida as the top 2 seeds. If Creighton wins its first match, it'll face the Gators in the second round. Like we talked about, their numbers are so good. Wisconsin's. Any potential problems there?
I don't think so. I think the only thing that, I mean, Wisconsin's biggest hurdle this season has been COVID issues and being able to play matches. They went 13-0, so they only got to play 13 matches. So the numbers are really good. You wonder how well they've been tested, how ready they'll be to get into this grind of. I mean, heck, the tournament. Playing 2 days and a couple days off, and you're playing 2 days again, then a couple days off, and you're playing again. So it's a little bit different than kind of what they've experienced this year. But they also brought a lot back from last year's team, though they're plugging in a couple of young players. in the middle of that rotation. So I don't really see, as long as Wisconsin plays well, I don't really see Ohio State or Florida or BYU or Creighton if they're were able to make it out of there, or Missouri, whoever it is. I don't really see any of those teams pushing them. I think Nebraska is probably their biggest hurdle for sure,
Yeah.
which makes sense based on the seeding. But I think I don't know that those teams are on the same tier as long as Wisconsin is playing like we know Wisconsin can play.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by BYU a little bit. Like, I think they're better than 16, but still, maybe they can take a set off Wisconsin if, they really get some early momentum. But the Badgers, I think, should cruise for the most part. And then in the last remaining one we haven't talked about, Kentucky's got a pretty good draw too.
Yeah,
So Washington State, Oregon, and the Purdue are the other national seeds there. We talk about volleyball in Nebraska, like the quality of club volleyball and high school volleyball, but this makes me wonder what the heck's going on with Kentucky. So you got Louisville as 13th nationally in hitting percentage. Kentucky leads the country at 361. And I don't know if I wrote it down or not, but Western Kentucky's also, I think, in the
yeah.
top 5.
Well, they're in Kentucky's same region there. They beat Jackson State in the first round. They're playing Washington State in the second round, and winner will get Kentucky, assuming that they take care of business.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know. Nebraska, I think, still holds the title, but there must be some pretty good high school volleyball going on in the state of Kentucky as well.
No, again, they had hired some pretty good coaches that know a thing or two about a good volleyball environment and everything like that.
That's true. We got to dock them a little bit because they imported 2 of their key coaches from Nebraska. Good point. Okay, it's Final Four time, and I'm really mad at Matt, and I need you to convey that to him because that's my Final Four as well. I'm going to take Wisconsin. I'm going to take Nebraska, though. So John Cook talked about this on Sunday in his post availability meeting about just the long layoff that they're going to have. That concerns me a little bit too, just because all season long I feel like this team has struggled at times to get going, like to be ready to go from first serve. We saw it against Minnesota, we saw it against Ohio State, which are two good teams, but we also saw it against a team like Michigan when Michigan took that first set in the first meeting between those 2 teams. So is that of any concern for you, or I guess where's Nebraska at entering this tournament?
Yeah, absolutely, it is of a concern. I think they, even though you'd like to get like Cook said, he'd almost rather be unseeded so they get to play that first day. But even in the second round, I think whether it's Texas State or Utah Valley, I think they should be okay even if they get off to a slow start. They should be talented enough to win that, even if it takes them a little to get into it. And then you would hope that moving forward beyond that, you get that first game to get the rust out of the way. That you'd be able to kind of make up for the lost time and kind of figure yourself out in that first match, and then hopefully play closer to what you're capable of. And hopefully as the tournament goes, you're able to kind of step it up each step of the way, which is what they're going to need to do because of the teams they're going to be facing. It's not just related to the 3-week layoff and just in general, what I mentioned, they only played 2 ranked teams this season. They seemed to figure some things out, and then the next match, they'd kind of struggle in some other areas, but make up for it in others. So you just wonder, where is the attacking situation going in? How trustworthy are the outside hitters, both Lexi Sun, Maddie Kubik, and Jazz Sweet, who obviously with Riley Zune's injury, it's her spot, and she's not losing it. So that's kind of the one question mark. We never Lexi got on a roll. Obviously, one player that the week in the Big Ten 2 times in a 3-week span was hitting over 250 for like 7, 8, 9 matches in a row. But then the last time we saw her, didn't play quite as well, so kind of fell back. And Maddie and Jazz are hitting. Jazz played well 3 of the last 4 matches, but also kind of had the one in there where kind of fell off again. So that's the biggest concern for me is how reliable is their outside hitting, and then obviously kind of the passing and all that to set up to allow those players to thrive. And that's something that they've been up and down with. And that's ultimately the passing and serving is what cost them a deeper run last year. And I think they are serving better this season. But the passing has been good at times, and at other times they struggle in that area. So I ultimately I'm just kind of in a place where you bet on John Cook and until they face a team that's clearly superior. And I think that'll probably be Wisconsin, but until then, I just kind of have faith that he'll be able to figure it out.
Yeah, that's one area where a relatively tough draw might help them a little bit because, whether they play Texas State or Utah Valley, I went to basketball camp at Utah Valley many, many years ago, which is a whole other story, not for this time. But, if they get Texas State, you can be like, hey, these guys beat Baylor. We got to be ready to go. And then from there, you're playing either, Baylor, Texas, or Penn State, which should have their attention. So we'll see if that trait fades a little bit here as they get into tournament time.
Well, and the thing too is that Cook mentioned he thinks potentially the crowd situation has played a part in their slow starts, just based off of what Nebraska is used to playing in front of, and it's been completely different this year, and they've kind of struggled to make that adjustment, even though they played in obviously non-conference tournaments, road matches where the gyms haven't been packed, but and even in some of those, I think they potentially got off to some slow starts in the past. So, and that's the thing about this tournament is until you make the regional finals, it's going to be like you said, the club environment. The players and coaches are getting 2 tickets apparently. That's it for the first 3 rounds. 2 tickets, and that's all they're going to allow in there. They're not allowing any media whatsoever in the gym for the first 3 rounds. So it's going to be all remote. So it's going to be a really intimate environment. They're not going to be many people in there. So that's kind of another area where you worry a little bit about kind of the slow starts and kind of figuring things out. Everybody will be on a level playing field. So it's not going to be an excuse that Nebraska struggles with that, but it is something that they're going to have to navigate through.
Yeah. So just to recap for everybody, I had Louisville and Kentucky on my other side. I really want that intrastate matchup, but as Matt pointed out, and as you shared with us here, also a matchup of former Huskers. And I mean, why can Louisville get there? Washington, they're allowing almost a 200 opponent hitting percentage. That concerns me a little bit against a team with as much offense as Louisville. And also Minnesota doesn't have that kind of 300, 150 gap that John Cook mentioned. Their opponent hitting percentage, they rank 136, which is still above average with 300 plus teams in playing volleyball, but not quite what I'd expect from a 3 seed. So I'm going with Cardinals. I'm going with Danny. Who do you got in the Final Four?
Yeah, that ultimately, I think Wisconsin and Kentucky, I think, are locks. I'd be very surprised to see anybody take them off. Just you mentioned, their numbers are just so superior to everybody else. The one thing that does give me a little bit of pause about Minnesota is they have when they played Wisconsin, they were short-handed. They didn't have their setter. They're missing some other key players. So it's hard to know, look at Minnesota as a whole this season and think that that's what they are. They've kind of been up and down, had some players miss. They've got 1, 2, looks like they only have 4 players that have played in all 17 matches this season. Minnesota does. So I think Minnesota is probably a little bit better than their numbers would say if they're going to be at full strength in the postseason. And at this point, we don't necessarily know for sure about anybody. We don't know where anybody stands. They're not going to give us a player availability update right now for every team in the field going into this as we kind of break it down. So, but ultimately, I think that is kind of the one. I like, again, we talked about just kind of go with the trust of Nebraska and take them to win that against Texas and or whoever else comes out of that Texas that Baylor lost to Texas State late in the season. You kind of I don't know if that makes you feel better about Nebraska's second round draw or worse about Nebraska's second round draw or better about their third round draw potentially. But I went with kind of the 1, 2, 3, 5 seed. I went with Minnesota there ultimately over Louisville. Just kind of boring, and you would think if there's any season for there to be upsets and teams to make a run, it would be this one where we know less about these teams, and even the good teams, they've only played 15, 16, 17 matches a lot of times. So you would think that would lead to more variability in terms of who's going to come out on top. But ultimately, it kind of seems like those are probably for the 5 or 6 best teams in the country, and that's kind of what I'm going with.
Yeah, and the volleyball has always been, pretty chalky.
Yeah.
For the most part. It's not the NCAA basketball tournament. Although I was thinking about that as I was watching the championship game. What would you have said coming in? Is this a tournament for chalk, or is it a tournament for a ton of upsets? And you had the 2 best teams everybody thought all year long playing the championship game, but you also had UCLA, come in there, and I guess Houston was pretty much chalk as well. So we'll see.
Sorry to you about having our Hail Varsity Hurrdat bracket. Kind of one person picked Baylor to win it all, and wasn't in the mix the entire time, but because of the point value, shot right up. So, yeah, congrats. You finished second. I was third. Frustrating. 10 points behind you. But,
yeah.
Well, kind of rug swept out from us under. Thanks a lot, Gonzaga.
Right. That was pretty shocking. But hey, that's the beauty of a 1-game thing. It can go that way. We'll see if it goes that way next week. Nebraska will play on Wednesday against whoever.
Thursday.
Wednesday's
first round.
Yep.
And they're going to stream all these on Watch ESPN, the first round games, and then I think we'll get onto TV more as the bracket moves on. But so yeah, kind of stay tuned. Watch ESPN. That all those first and second round matches will be available there. So that's where you're going to need to go.
Yep, we'll have plenty of coverage leading up to it, and then of course coverage from the matches themselves, and hopefully we get the storybook ending. Even though the past year has been far from a storybook, we always kind of looked at tournaments in Omaha. It's gonna be a little bit different, but we'll see what Nebraska can do. So thanks for checking us out. Make sure to read hailvarsity.com. Subscribe. We'll have the April issue out shortly. It's almost getting to yearbook time as well. So plenty of good stuff coming up this spring. Thanks, Jacob.
Thanks, Brandon.